أعزائي طلبة المرحلة الثانية، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. هذه هي المحاضرة، هي تكملة محاضرة البريتونيوم. قلنا أنه البريتونيوم it have the ability to form a double layer. From these double layers it will form certain structures. المحاضرة السابقة سميناها الأومنتا أو الأومنتم. هاي المحاضرة we have another structures that is formed by a double layer which is called the peritoneal ligaments. Peritoneal ligaments. Peritoneal ligaments are two-layered fold of peritoneum. It connects solid viscera to the abdominal walls. From its name, it is because it is a ligament, so it will connect a solid viscera to the abdominal walls. From these ligaments, these are the ligaments of the spleen. This is the spleen, and it's completely covered by peritoneum, and it have ligament to attach it to the nearby structures. From these ligaments is the gastrosplenic ligament. Gastrosplenic ligament that connect the hilum of the spleen to the stomach. Splenorenal ligament. Splenorenal ligament or the lienorenal ligament that connect the spleen to the left kidney. From this ligament also the ligaments of the liver. The ligaments of the liver also, it is a double layer of peritoneum. At certain sites it will form a ligament that attach the liver to the anterior abdominal wall or to the diaphragm or to the nearby structures. These are the falciform ligament, the coronary ligament, the right and left triangular ligaments. Here we can see this is another drawing to the ligaments of the liver. This is the falciform ligament. From its lower free border we have another ligament that's called ligamentum teres hepatis, but the double layer is just this, the falciform ligament attaching the liver to the anterior abdominal wall and the diaphragm. And we have the coronary ligament, and the right and left extremity it will be formed by the right and left triangular ligaments. In between the layers of this is the coronary ligament, the upper layer and the lower layer, there's an area that is devoid of peritoneum, and it is called the bare area of the liver. Here the liver is in direct contact with the diaphragm, called this area also it is called the extraperitoneal space. This is the bare area of the liver in direct contact with the liver, and it is called the extraperitoneal space. Why? Because it is devoid of peritoneum. It is devoid of peritoneum. Another structure that is formed by the peritoneum is the mesenteries. Mesenteries are two-layered fold of peritoneum, connecting parts of the intestine, whether it is small or large, to the posterior abdominal wall. Example on this mesentery is the mesentery of the small intestine, it's called mesentery proper, and the transverse mesocolon and the sigmoid mesocolon. This diagram showing that the embryonic origin of the mesentery, we have what we call the dorsal mesentery and the ventral mesentery. The dorsal mesentery, and we can see that the blood vessel of the GI tract is passing through this mesentery from the abdominal aorta. And also we can see here how the mesentery is attaching or fixing the gut tube or different gut organs, that's the stomach, small intestine or large intestine, attaching it to the posterior abdominal wall, or attaching the liver to the anterior abdominal wall or to the stomach. This is one of the an important function of the mesentery is for the passage of blood vessel from the abdominal aorta to the GI tract, or in fixing the organ in position to the posterior abdominal wall. The mesentery of the small intestine. This is the small intestine, coils of small intestine. It is attached to the posterior abdominal wall by this mesentery, which is a broad, fan-shaped fold of peritoneum, connecting the coils of the jejunum and ileum to the posterior abdominal wall. Forms a natural peritoneal barrier. Forms natural peritoneal barrier. Here, the mesentery of the small intestine is just appear like fan shape. fan يعني شكلها مثل المروحة اليدوية. And it has an important function in attaching the coils of small intestine to the posterior abdominal wall. And it have these are the lymphatics and the blood vessel passing through it. This is the mesenteries and the mesocolon. This is the transverse mesocolon. It's also a double layer of peritoneum connecting the transverse mesocolon to the posterior abdominal wall. Another mesentery that is called mesoappendix, or the mesentery of the appendix. This is a small mesentery that also form a passageway for the blood vessel of the appendix. Mesoappendix. The sigmoid mesocolon on the mesentery of the sigmoid colon. Also, it is a double layer of peritoneum which have its roots as an inverted V shape attaching the sigmoid colon to the pelvic wall. It's a double layer of peritoneum attaching the sigmoid colon to the pelvic wall. When peritoneum reaches to a certain sites, it will undergo reflections. It will form either recesses, spaces, pouches, or fossae. The duodenal recesses. At the duodenojejunal junction, this angle is the junction in between duodenum and the jejunum. At the duodenojejunal junction, there will be a reflection of the peritoneum, and it will form what we call recesses that lies nearby to the duodenum. These recesses can be called superior duodenal, inferior duodenal, paraduodenal, and another one called retroduodenal. These recesses that's related to the duodenum is formed near the junction of the duodenum with the beginning of the jejunum, or what is called duodenojejunal junction. Another recess that lies at the root of the sigmoid mesocolon called intersigmoid recess. It lies at the apex. This is the sigmoid mesocolon. When we reflect it upward at its apex, we have what we call the intersigmoid recess. Another recess that is formed nearby the upper and lower ileocecal folds. These are called superior and inferior ileocecal recesses. Another important recess that lies just behind or posterior to the cecum is called retrocecal recess. This is recess, the appendix, it might lie in this retrocecal recess. Spaces. These spaces are what we call the subphrenic space. Subphrenic, it means the space that lies below the diaphragm. So subphrenic these are in blue color, subphrenic space. We have right and left anterior subphrenic spaces. Also, we have right posterior subphrenic space, or it's called hepatorenal recess. Hepatorenal recess, it means it's situated in between the liver and the right kidney. Hepatorenal recess. Also, as we said before, we have the right extraperitoneal space, that lies in between the bare area of the liver and the diaphragm. We call it extraperitoneal because it is devoid of peritoneum. These are the two right and left anterior subphrenic spaces situated in between the diaphragm above and the liver below. These are the right and left anterior subphrenic spaces. They lie between the diaphragm and the liver, and each one on each side of the falciform ligament. يعني راح يكون الفالسيفورم ligament is in between the right and left anterior subphrenic space. The hepatorenal recess, from its name, hepatorenal, it means it lies in between the right lobe of the liver and the right kidney. This space, hepatorenal space, in between the right lobe of the liver and the right kidney. What is the importance of these spaces, يعني subphrenic spaces, or hepatorenal space? There is a continuity in between it and the paracolic gutter downward. The paracolic gutter downward. The paracolic gutters. The paracolic gutters معناها أنه in this region lie on the lateral and medial sides of the ascending and descending colon. It means on both sides of the colon. Paracolic. Gutters معناها أعتقد المنحدر. The paracolic gutters lie on the lateral and medial side of the ascending and descending colon respectively. مثل ما قلنا أنه subphrenic spaces and the paracolic gutters are clinically important. Why? Because there is a continuity in between them, because they may be a site for the collection and movement of infected peritoneal fluids. قاعد نشوف هنا هذا هو descending colon، هذا هو ascending with descending colon, and we have this site of reflection of peritoneum covering the colon. This on the medial and right side of the colon, on the medial and lateral side of the ascending colon, we have this angle that is called the paracolic gutters. The paracolic gutters, and there is a continuity with the of this paracolic gutter, a continuity with the subphrenic spaces, and there is chance for the movement of fluid, of infected fluid, from the subphrenic spaces to the paracolic gutters. What are the folds and fossae of the anterior abdominal wall that is formed by the reflection of peritoneum or certain structures on the anterior abdominal wall? First of all, at the midline, we have what we call the median umbilical fold, to contain the remnant of urachus. And this fold is called the median, it means at the midline, median umbilical ligament, or median umbilical ligament is formed by the median umbilical fold. Lateral to it, another fold is called medial umbilical fold. Medial umbilical fold. Medial umbilical fold contains the remnants of the umbilical arteries. Umbilical arteries, remnants of umbilical arteries, it is fibrous, and it is called the medial umbilical ligaments. These remnants are called medial umbilical ligaments, but the fold is called medial umbilical fold. The most lateral one, this one is called the lateral umbilical fold, and this lateral umbilical fold contains the inferior epigastric vessels. So, this fold, at the midline, we have the median umbilical fold formed by the urachus, medial umbilical fold formed by remnants of umbilical arteries, and the lateral umbilical fold formed by the inferior epigastric vessels. هذه هنا إعادة إلها إنه هذا هو median umbilical fold medial umbilical fold and the lateral umbilical fold. Lateral umbilical fold is formed by the epigastric vessels originating from the external iliac vessel, and the medial umbilical fold is formed by the remnant of the umbilical arteries, and the median umbilical fold formed by a remnant of urachus that have a connection with the urinary bladder. In between these folds we have what we call the fossae. راح تكون هنا in between the lateral and medial we have the medial umbilical fossa, and then another fossa in between the medial and the median is called supravesical fossa. Pouches. Another forms of spaces that's formed by reflection of peritoneal layer on certain organs, what we call the pouches. In female we have what we call the rectouterine pouch. Here the peritoneum covering the rectum, it will be reflected on the posterior surface of the uterus, and this space is formed by the it will form the rectouterine pouch, or it is known as the rectouterine pouch, in between the rectum and the uterus. While anterior to the uterus, here the peritoneum will be reflected on the superior surface of the urinary bladder. This is called the vesicouterine pouch. While in male we have just one pouch that's called rectovesical pouch. This is in male. This is the rectovesical pouch between the rectum and the urinary bladder. While in female we have the rectouterine pouch between rectum and uterus, and we have the vesicouterine pouch that lies in between the urinary bladder and the uterus. Because the peritoneal cavity regarded as the most extensive cavity in the body, we can use this cavity for dialysis, for peritoneal, what we call the peritoneal dialysis. Another important issue is that this peritoneal cavity, in certain pathological condition, it might contain plenty of fluid, an abnormal collection of fluid, and this abnormal collection of fluid is called ascites, and this ascites, it might be drained through the anterior abdominal wall. Thank you.